snapshot. The Europe East Security and Logistics Report, dated September 22, 2025. Our mission today isn't really about hunting for a crisis. It's more about analyzing the discipline involved. We need to unpack what's actually happening now, post-Zapad redeployment. What does that persistent vigilance look like on the ground? And crucially, how does that high-stakes security posture filter back to things like supply chains, logistics, market stability?
Right. And what's really key to grasp about this report, I think, is that the central theme isn't alarm. It's much more about operational control. Yeah. The situation is described as having no breaches, but, and this is important, requiring smarter layers of defense. So this isn't like a hot crisis escalating rapidly. It's more of a calculated high-maintenance state. As the report itself concludes, it demands discipline over drama.
That phrase, discipline over drama, that really sticks out. Okay, let's start with the security picture then. The report talks about another quiet night across the flank. But, we both know a quiet night doesn't mean nothing's happening. Zero operational tempo isn't realistic. So what specific kind of hard measures are detailed in the sources? What's keeping the skies quiet, focusing on the visible stuff first?
Well, the measures are definitely physical. They're expensive, and they are non-stop. We're talking about a high density of patrols, the combat air patrols, CCAPs. They remain thick, particularly around dusk when the light starts to fade. And that includes routine quick reaction alert jets, the QRA, standing by. Plus, you've got constant AOACS surveillance rotations.
Okay, so a very active presence.
Very active. And furthermore, there's absolutely zero ambiguity about the response if something does happen. The rules of engagement, the RE, are crystal clear. The standing order is still shoot if inside ROE for any unauthorized intrusion. No messing around. They're basically maintaining a very high ceiling of conventional deterrence. It's all about consistent, persistent presence.
Right. Okay. So that covers the visible stuff, the jets, the radar. But the report then immediately pivots, doesn't it? It shifts focus to threats that are, well, much less traditional. Invisible, even. If the skies are technically quiet, what are these new, specific, persistent challenges that need constant attention now?
Yeah, the sourcing confirms that. The traditional threats, they're increasingly giving way to these invisible electronic ones. We're seeing electronic warfare, EW activities. That means jamming, interference, and regular advisories about GNSS.
GNSS, so GPS signals, basically.
Exactly, your GPS. We're talking short spoofing pockets, little bubbles where the signal is faked or disrupted.
Yeah.
And it seems to happen mostly from sunset until late evening.
Okay, short spoofing pockets. What does that actually mean for, say, a civilian truck driver or a commercial airline? How do you operate when your GPS, which is, fundamental, is unreliable or maybe even actively lying to you?
Well, it means that operating in what they call a degraded mode has just become routine. It's the new normal. Aviation, heavy trucking, they've officially adopted these degraded mode standard operating procedures, or SOPs.
So it's not just use a map.
Oh no, it's more complex. It means slowing down. It means keeping greater separation between vehicles or aircraft. For a pilot, it means relying much more heavily on older tech, like inertial navigation systems and ground radar, instead of just glancing at the GPS. And for that truck driver you mentioned, moving valuable stuff, that 30-minute delay at the border we talked about can easily stretch to 2 hours if they're forced to use non-digital ways to verify their route. It's like an efficiency tax, really, applied by this constant electronic tension.
An efficiency tax. That's a really powerful way to put it. The cost of invisible warfare paid in minutes and fuel. I was also struck reading this by how quickly they seem to be learning to fight this kind of invisible threat.
Yes, the after-action tuning, the adjustments, they're immediate. That's a key insight here. Debriefs from probes, electronic intrusions, maybe small drone flights that happened last week. That information is already feeding into a common counter-UAS tactics, techniques, and procedures pack, a TTP pack, and that gets instantly shared across all the Baltic Black Sea desks. They're not waiting for some monthly review meeting. It's real-time integration of lessons learned.
But hang on, is immediate tuning really enough? I mean, if these EW threats are routine, doesn't that kind of suggest the adversaries are also constantly shifting? Aren't the countermeasures maybe already a bit obsolete by the time they get rolled out across the whole region?
That is the absolute core challenge of this whole persistent environment. It's a constant game of chess, or maybe cat and mouse. The sources suggest the current strategy isn't really aiming for permanent immunity, because that might be impossible. Instead, it's about achieving maximum delay and disruption of any intrusion, using that shared TTP pack. They're trying to make the operation so costly, so detectable for the adversary, that it's just not worth the intel they might gain. It's like attrition warfare, but fought with software and signals.
Attrition warfare with software. Okay. And we can't forget the info war side of this, can we? The report notes these low-grade NATO escalation narratives keep popping up in certain channels.
Right. But interestingly, the counter seems quite mundane, almost bureaucratic. Local municipalities are apparently countering this by sticking really rigidly to single message alerts, and they have clear confidence labels attached, like, we're 80% sure of this.
Fighting the rumor mill with bureaucratic clarity. Interesting.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. We've talked about keeping skies quiet, adapting to invisible threats. That constant tuning must demand hardware sustainability. So let's look at the concrete physical response. What are the capitals actually buying under these new safe purchase notices? Security assistance framework for Europe. What hardware is getting prioritized for what seems like a long game? Yeah, the procurement lists are pretty heavy, and they definitely tell a story about how they see the threat evolving. The highest volume orders, they're for sensors, jammers, short-range air defense, SHORAD systems, and critically repair spares. Lots of spares. Those early safe tranches, the first waves of funding, are specifically prioritizing interceptors, drone kits, EW sets, and again, those spares. It really looks like they're preparing for a sustained defense against small, persistent robotic threats, not just, mass tank divisions of the past.
The fact that spares and drone kits are right up there with interceptors, that feels like a really profound shift in procurement philosophy, doesn't it? It's moving away from just the glamour of, say, a brand new fighter jet.
Exactly.
It's not just about what they have, but how they plan to keep it working day in, day out for maybe the next 5 years or more.
Precisely. And the clear preference being logged in these deals is for framework deals over one-offs. This is basically the anti-emergency buying strategy. It signals a long-term strategic commitment. They want reliable supply chains locked in.
Okay, but framework deals, they kind of lock you in, right? With specific vendors, specific platforms. Isn't there a risk there that by prioritizing this long-term supply chain predictability, they might lose the agility to pivot quickly, if the threat changes dramatically again and there's some brand new must-have tech out there?
That is absolutely the trade-off. And the report kind of acknowledges it implicitly. Predictability, right now, seems to be valued over having the absolute bleeding edge capability. They appear to be optimizing for the readiness rate, the percentage of their gear that's actually functional at any given moment. So a proven, maybe slightly older system, but one with guaranteed spare parts readily available, is seen as superior right now to some hyper-advanced system that might be grounded for weeks waiting for a custom replacement chip from overseas.
Readiness over bleeding edge. Got it.
And if you want to connect this to the bigger picture, the key intelligence item to watch what the analysts are tracking is the sequencing of these safe buys. Which capitals put in orders for sensors first versus SHRAD versus munitions? And maybe even more revealing, what are the delivery SLAs, the service level agreements attached to those contracts?
SLAs. Delivery times, basically.
Exactly. That's sequencing and how fast they expect delivery. That tells us a huge amount about whether they fear an immediate ground threat or if they're digging in for a long-term, low-altitude electronic attrition fight.
The report gives us a great analogy, actually, to frame this whole defense posture. I think it sums up that feeling perfectly. It says, treat the flank like winter ops, slow, layered, and disciplined.
Winter ops.
Yeah, that really drives home the expectation of a sustained, probably difficult, low-tempo effort, not a quick fix. Okay, let's move from the military hardware and posture now down to the civilian layer. Logistics, daily life, commerce. How does this constant state of vigilance actually affect moving people and goods? Borders, supply chains. Is stuff still managing to get through relatively okay?
It is, mostly, but definitely with tangible friction. Like sandpaper in the system, Belarus crossings, for instance, are apparently normalizing, which is good news. But users still need to plan for a guaranteed buffer, plus 15 to 30 minutes, just baked in. Rail and intermodal transport, containers on trains and trucks, they're near their regular cadence. But again, subject to those degraded mode SOPs we talked about earlier. Potential for delays.
Plan plus 30 minutes. That's just a constant measurable tax on daily life and business, isn't it? If you're a logistics manager trying to coordinate perishable goods or a trucker on a really tight schedule, that's just the cost of doing business there now.
It absolutely is. It's baked into the operational expense calculations now. Meanwhile, you look at the Ukraine corridors, they're described as stable. Humanitarian lanes are consistently prioritized, which is good. But everyone crossing is operating with increased periodic inspections. Things just take longer. Airports, ops, normal for now.
Yeah.
But there are no down playbooks that notice the airman protocols are apparently updated and ready to go. ready to be deployed instantly if the electronic interference or, God forbid, physical strike tempo flickers upwards.
You mentioned the SCLE quick insight map in the source material. I found that really helpful, actually. It illustrates just how diverse the needs are, the security needs across different civilian groups.
Yeah, it's a neat framework. It's the ultimate who cares about what breakdown. So S is for stakeholders, residents. They just want clear need-to-act pings, minimal noise, maximum clarity if something is really wrong. Logistics companies, they need predictable ETAs, estimated times of arrival. Even if those ETAs already include that buffer we mentioned, predictability is king. Mayors, local leaders, their big focus is on rumor control, stamping out misinformation quickly. And then you've got small and medium enterprises, SMEs, they're tracking the practical stuff, fluctuating fuel prices, insurance costs, the bottom line reality.
Right. And the C?
C is for constraint flip. And this is maybe the core lesson learned here. Clarity volume. They found out the hard way, probably, that fewer, crisper alerts actually beat a constant drip feed of maybe ambiguous information. Because information overload, it leads to complacency just as easily as it leads to panic. People just tune it out.
That makes sense. Clarity over volume. LL is the layers, right. Defining the scope.
Exactly. L for layers. From the micro level, like GNSS advisories or the precise timing of a NOTAM, all the way up to the macro level, which is about alliance credibility, long-term deterrence.
And E edge cases. This is where the really tricky stuff often lies, isn't it? The nuances.
Yeah, E for edge cases. Yeah. This is where that discipline really has to show up. It includes things like actively watching for EW overlap with medevac routes, making absolutely sure that electronic jamming doesn't accidentally interfere with critical medical transport, helicopters, communication, or navigation. Hugely important. And they also have to manage debris, false alarms, especially in low-density rural areas.
Debris false alarms, like storm debris triggering sensors.
Could be. Imagine a small municipality scrambling emergency services because some sensor picked up weather debris thinking it's incoming. It sucks up precious resources instantly. And worse, it immediately fuels those low-grade political narratives about incompetence or overreaction that we talked about earlier. So managing information reliability is almost as important as managing the actual missile threat itself.
Wow. Okay, let's pull back a bit then. Let's talk about the money. We've got this picture of high military vigilance, complex logistics with built-in friction. What does all this mean for the regional economy, for the markets? Is the region still seen as stable enough for, sustained investment?
Remarkably, the answer seems to be yes. The report notes significant economic resilience, despite all this operational tension. Currencies like the Polish zloty, PLN, the Hungarian forint, HUF, the Romanian leu, RRON, they're described as broadly range-bound, stable, basically. We are definitely not seeing a big security-driven sell-off. Money isn't fleeing the region because of this tension.
Really? That's quite something.
It is. In fact, the financial markets, what they call the front ends, the short-term trading, they're apparently tracking this week's big EU economic data prints more closely than the security noise. That is a massive indicator. It suggests either real confidence or maybe just extreme compartmentalization between the economic sphere and the military one. Investors seem to be treating the persistent military tension almost like background noise. Important background noise, sure, but not a systemic threat that means you have to liquidate your portfolio right now.
So if it's not the drone activity or the EW spikes driving markets, what is the major macro watch item right now, according to the report?
The key thing to watch is pretty standard economic data, actually. EU inflation figures, growth prints coming out towards the end of the month, and any resulting short-term moves in those currencies we mentioned, the PLN, HUF, RON. That economic data is expected to drive far more market movement in those currencies than, say, another border-skirting UAV or some more electronic spoofing incidents. The economy seems to be operating largely on its own momentum, quite compartmentalized from the day-to-day security environment.
And that stability, despite all the friction and vigilance, that really underlines why the philosophy that signed off this whole report works, doesn't it? Discipline over drama.
Absolutely. If we were to recap the overall state described here, the daily routines, both for the military and for civilians, they seem to have settled into a kind of pattern, a new normal.
Yeah.
But, and it's a big but, vigilance remains extremely high. Those quiet skies we started with, they are genuinely the result of a successful ongoing maintenance job. And the report's bottom line seems to be, the maintenance is working, for now. The key to keeping it working seems to hinge on that smart procurement we discussed, really prioritizing sensors, jammers, spares, and carefully managing the information flow, where clarity always has to be greater than volume.
And for you, listening, understanding these kinds of micro details, the difference between a routine Q or A rotation and a sudden, unexpected scramble, that's really critical for reading the bigger macro picture accurately. It teaches you how to assess risk properly in a world that seems increasingly defined by this persistent, low-grade tension. It helps ensure you react, or advise others to react, only to genuine shifts and crises, and not just to the noise of routine operations. So here's a provocative thought for you to maybe mull over, building directly on that maintenance and procurement theme we just discussed. If this current security environment really does require long-term maintenance, like those difficult winter operations, and if governments are prioritizing sustainment, keeping things running, what happens when a government deliberately decides to prioritize buying repair spares and maybe critical software updates before they buy the next big batch of physical munitions like missiles or shells?
Yeah. What does that specific sequencing spares first, ammo second, really tell us about their immediate threat assessment? How worried are they about right now versus perhaps their actual long-term political preparedness and public commitment for a truly protracted slow burn conflict that could last years? It really changes how you might interpret every single defense spending announcement, doesn't it?
Food for thought indeed. Always a pleasure diving into the data with you. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.